Yeah, dude, back in the day, I mean, I just missed the outlaw days. I had no interest in going into legal weed.
Right.
And I knew that. I'm like, I'm in it for the thrill and just the outlaw part of it.
Right. Just as a detour in this conversation, though, like, how do you see it going? Because I always hear from people that, like, at some point, the switch is going to get flipped, weed's going to be federally legal, and you'll be able to buy, you know, a pack of Runts pre-rolls at the gas station.
Fuck, dude. It'll probably get there somehow. Now, big tobacco is not going to own it. They already.
You don't think so?
I don't think so, because weed is too difficult. There's too many inputs. It's not like tobacco where it's such a uniform crop that you can just buy up so many acres and plant and just recycle and repeat. Weed is like, there's so many different strains. There's so much work that you have to tend the crop, and there's just a lot of it's more artistic. So I don't see them being able to control such like a micro kind of agriculture.
But don't you think it'll probably become like where, you know, you can definitely go get some craft beer that has like a very unique thing to it, and it costs 3 times as much as whatever you might buy at 7-Eleven, but most people are still going to go to 7-Eleven, right? Don't you think it'll probably get to that point?
I think it'll be, I don't know if it'll ever be in 7-Eleven. They'll probably have their own dedicated, because the government has to make money out of it. So it'll probably be like how Canadian liquor shops, like you have to go to the liquor store in Canada, or at least BC, to buy any kind of alcohol. Right. You can't even get it at 7-Eleven. That's probably how the states will go about it. But I don't think, I think it'll, once the feds make it fully legal, it'll still be up to the states if they want to have it or not. You know what I mean? Like there's some states issues, like abortion. Like that's probably got to be decided by the states.
And so then right there and then there'll still be a pretty thriving black market to get it to all the other states.
I think so, because I think Alabama, I think the Bible Belt will put real constraints around how you're allowed to sell weed there.
Same thing with alcohol, really.
For sure.
You go to Philly, and there used to be just the most bizarre laws about buying alcohol in Philly. I can't remember. I remember at one point having to go into a bar to buy a 6-pack to take home. Like they had to take the beers that they were going to sell in the bar and then put them into the cardboard thing to sell it to me. I couldn't go to the corner store. I don't know if it's still like that.
That's bizarre. Well, I know there's dry counties. There's counties where you can't sell booze on Sunday. I know there's still bootlegging that goes on in like the Carolinas and shit like that.
I've had some moonshine in my day. You ever try it?
No, I mean, well, I had Pruno in prison. You know, but I mean, that shit that'll turn you blind.
Yeah, does it really?
Probably turn you gay if you drank enough.
For real?
Yeah.
Well,
I was so twisted. I was so f***ed up. I was like, damn. Eddie from 18th Street is looking fine as a
Yeah, really. No, yeah, we call that a torta. Actually, I would never disrespect anyone from 18th Street. Anyway,
no.
But so, no, that just hits hard because I'm reading this book right now about a kid who joined an 18th Street gang and ended up like killing a dude who wasn't paying his extortion money, and or he shot the guy up, but one of the bullets went through him and killed a 6-month-old baby. Right. And then he basically the gang took him to Mexico to exterminate him, and it didn't work out, and he lived to tell the tale and to turn on them. But he was so young that he thought that he was going to basically be able to get off for killing the baby by turning in the gang leaders. And it's like, no, actually, we want the baby killer.
So. Wow. So how much time did he get?
I'm assuming life, but I haven't actually finished the book yet. Yeah.
Yeah, it depends what year, man, because before 3 strikes, if it was California, bro, you could kill him if you were a minor and be out in like 3 months.
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, I interviewed this. I got a lot of shit in the hip hop world for interviewing this kid Blockstar, who basically killed Pop Smoke, or he was involved with killing Pop Smoke. And he did like 4 years or whatever. But it's also like widely assumed that he probably was just the driver or something, or maybe he really pulled the trigger, but he was the kid on the case, so they ended up just putting it on him. So we don't really know.
Yeah, in places like Oregon, man, I mean, you get more time for 3 DUIs. It's crazy. If you're in a smaller state where they need to feed the beast, like there's no getting out for killing somebody in 5 years. You know what I mean? Like you just get life. People get. You do not want to do crime in like a white, country state.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, yeah, they're just going to prosecute you way harder than a place that's kind of inundated with it.
They got nothing to do.
Yeah.
No,
definitely. Okay, so you end up meeting people that get you plugged with the cartels. You have to actually pay money in order to do a meeting with the cartels.
Yeah.
And then
I got a deal.
Yeah.
I just paid some guy who was going away to jail. He had a meth problem. I gave him 10 grand. And that's how I worked my way in with these guys.
Okay. And was that like terrifying to go and like actually face off with these people? Like, was it as intimidating as you might see on like an episode of Narcos or some shit?
No. I was only worried about like the cops busting in. Like I was worried. I was like, am I getting set up?
Right.
But like,
why would they kill you?
No, of course. They already, by this time, they needed distributors like me.
Okay.
They loved me, bro. You know, so it's like, these guys are like farmers. These are, you know, they'll have the one kid who speaks a little bit of English, right? He's like a 21-year-old. And the other dudes he's with, they still had like mud on their boots when I met him in the hotel room. They just came from the garden, right? And this is a tiny little town, Garberville. You can look it up so you know I'm not lying. Garberville was a Mendocino County little logging town, probably literally population of like 300. But the hotel rooms back in the day in Garberville were like $300 a night. And why do you think that is? Because millions, this is where every wholesaler used to descend on this little town from all over the country to re-up. So millions of dollars would be traded every day in like the travel lodge, you know? So, but no, I wasn't worried at all. I was more, you know, the only thing that worried me back in the day were like the poor dudes, the jack boys, you know what I mean? Like, but that's when we were going, like, we were small time, and that's when we used to get stuck up at gunpoint. You come back from class when I was going to college, your door would be kicked in.
Really?
Like, I was only worried about violence with, you know, the street people on the street level. So with bosses, there's that shit doesn't
When
exist.
did you start to get the realization that you were going to have people victimizing you like that? And to me, that almost is where my whole thought process about like, maybe I'll be a drug dealer, like that's kind of where it stops, is like, oh, if you do that, you have to be ready to kill somebody.
Yeah. Oh, so you thought like that back in the day?
Yeah, because it's just like, I had a friend when I was real young. We were roommates, and I was like 19, 20. And he meets a connect just randomly in Jersey. And we actually go to Jersey from New York City, and we see basically their trap house. And we see the huge pile of coke on the table and everything like that. And he's buying like a couple $1,000s worth of coke at a time, and he keeps flipping it and buying more each time. Finally, he gets up to the point where he's going to buy $10,000 worth of coke. And the dudes say, we're going to come to New York. We'll do the deal with you there. They come in, they get the money. They say they need to go to the car, which I don't know why. Why would we not do this drug deal right here in this apartment? I'm in the other room, like listening. And then they obviously take off and they are just out. And this dude was a psychopath who was definitely probably down to kill somebody, but he like really grappled with that because in his mind it's kind of like, well, now I need to go and I need to hang out on the block until I see one of these guys and I need to kill him. And then what? Right. They know where I live, where I got to change my. And I remember like really like thinking about that situation from his perspective and being like, you have no business getting into this kind of world unless you're ready to go the whole way. Because if somebody's going to rip you off and you just let it go, it's an untenable situation.
Well, two things, okay? Because I understand that.
Yeah.
Two things. One, I didn't grow up around that kind of environment at all.
You were already very deep before that even occurred to you that this might be the reality.
Correct. And the kind of people we were dealing with were all like middle class people. You know what I mean? Like, yes, we dealt with some black dudes and shit that would, you know, hustle work for us, but it was just a calm environment. Like everybody, there's just not a lot of violence in Portland, Oregon.
Yeah.
So it's just not something that, call it ignorance, call it like white privilege. It's just not something that ever crossed my mind. I mean, when we finally did start to get robbed every now and then, to me, that's like a business expense. You know, I'm like, oh, this guy gets me for a pound of weed. So what? Like I got 20 of them that I'm moving out the door tomorrow. So it just wasn't something. I always recognized that any kind of violence was not worth it. Because if you get robbed by somebody and he's more dangerous than you, well, then you have to go and kill him. Because how does it end? What, are you going to go rob him back and say, okay, tag, you're it? You know? Yeah. So,
well, he's not supposed to have anything in general anyway.
Exactly.
You know, he's probably going to take your shit and get rid of it as soon as possible. That's the nature of the robber.
And so he eats once.
Yeah.
So what? You know, now I cut him off.
Right.
And
but then you can't use that spot anymore. You can't live there. You have to be extremely careful about people not figuring out where you live or where you're storing your shit at.
And we
right?
were always like that. We were always super cautious. We always, especially at the higher levels, we always had contingency plans. But yeah, it's that's just something where if you get caught with your pants down for any amount of weight, 10 pounds, 20 pounds, like you're up, you know? So it's just very, very rare. I mean, but I suppose we would have just got put out of business, you know, because we did foul shit too when we were broke. Like we would get robbed for a quarter pound of weed, and that's like all we had.
Right.
So then we had to decide, do we go rob this guy back? I don't know. This guy's pretty dangerous. Let's go find a real Mark and let's put him out of business. So we did that kind of shit too, that kind of greasy shit.
I guess it's like unlike prison shit where it's like there's not that much of a honor culture because you're trying to stay in the shadows and you're not trying to be like you know, extremely well known, right? Like so it's like if somebody robs you, it's like it's not well publicized, people don't know.
No.
So then there's like less of a stigma associated with it.
Yeah, exactly. Like who gives a what is he going to go tell somebody and we look weak? It doesn't matter because we have the best price. We have the best quality at the lowest price.
It's also
that's where my mind always was.
But it's also like you would be a fool to not start a business just because there's some good percentage that you're going to get robbed or scammed in the process. Like when you read about the formation of PayPal, it's like they were getting scammed and ripped off so much. But the thought process was, we're getting this technology together. This company's going to be unbelievably valuable, but we need to make it relatively user-friendly to the point where they're able to scam us.
Right.
But ultimately, all these millions that we're getting scammed out of, it's not going to matter because we're developing something that's so big.
It's a fraction.
For me, like if I had been there when they were starting PayPal, I think I would have been like, no, I'm not doing this if somebody can rob me. Like the first person who robs me, I'm going to be so upset about it. I'm going to make the whole thing so that you can't rob me. And then that basically is going to like torture your growth. I think.
Okay, so you had a good head on your shoulders though. Because the way a responsible citizen would think is when selling drugs presented itself, you'd say, oh, wait a minute, I might have to hurt somebody or kill somebody or commit like a serious violent crime. I think I'll pass. Yeah. So you see where my mindset was. I was like, oh no, I saw all the money that was possible and I didn't think twice. And like a lot of people that I would ship product to, they would give it to guys who would then end up getting themselves killed. Like speaking of New Hampshire, you know, we would get packs out to people, you know, these Dominicans in Washington Heights, Manhattan, and they were shipping it all over the Eastern Seaboard. And I found out about a guy who had 5 pounds of my weed and he got held up and shot to death.
Right.
So, you know, I feel kind of bad about that, but my whole mindset was always to be at the top in the shadows. Like it's never going to affect me because I only deal with real business people, you know?
Definitely. I mean, it's crazy because in my mind, it's like, why would you ever kill somebody for $10,000 worth of weed? To a lot of people, that totally makes sense.
Well, especially
more than enough.
Especially back then when a pound of my shit, if you sold it out, if you went hand to hand with it, you could make like $7,000 off of 1 pound. So if you get somebody for 10, now you're in business. And he probably didn't they probably didn't mean to shoot him. It just, people are sloppy. And that's what happens when you're pulling some gangster shit, you know?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, like that was a come up back in the day. If you got somebody for 5 pounds of weed, you're now in the game. You could be a middleman. You could be a real big time trafficker.